A little bit about this series before we get started. Dragonboat hosts webinars on a regular basis for the product community. With this webinar mini-series, we wanted to do something special, and with the help of our incredible guests and participants, we wanted to dive into the subject of product ROI. How do you optimize it? How do you measure it? And how do you demonstrate it? We believe this is relevant across the board to CPOs, product managers, product operation folks. My name is Alyssa Vaz, and I'm a product manager at Dragonboat. I'm joined today by our Chief Customer Officer, Sridhar Nagarajan. So to kick us off, as people are coming in, if you're here, we'd love to hear from you. So say hello, introduce yourself, maybe add where you're joining from. You can add your role. That's always fun to know. And you can use the Zoom chat below to do that. And as we're kind of meeting and greeting, I'm going to go over a few housekeeping rules. No, sorry. The first is that this is a half an hour session, so it'll be recorded and available on demand later, as our other webinars are. If you have questions during the presentation, you can submit those. We'll either take them live or we'll have a dedicated Q&A at the end. And finally, as you probably know, Dragonboat is a SaaS platform that enables product leaders to accelerate product outcomes. So do check us out at dragonboat.io to learn more. So I'd like to, without further ado, introduce today's guest, Sridhar Nagarajan. Sridhar is an expert at scaling early-stage customer-focused SaaS companies. He's currently our Chief Customer Officer at Dragonboat, and he's advocating best practices he put in place as head of product at Chatmeter, where he also implemented Dragonboat as an early customer. Previously, Sridhar built the go-to-market team at Equid, a venture-backed startup helping to democratize e-commerce. He earned his product chops at PayPal, where he spent almost a decade growing the international product team to scale their B2B payments products beyond North America. Welcome, Sridhar.
Thank you. Thanks for that warm intro, Melissa, and welcome everyone to this webinar on product ROI. It's an often asked question, and it's something that is top of mind, especially for CPOs. What I'll be covering today is three things. They're pretty basic questions, but kind of important questions. One, what is product ROI, and why is it important now? Why should people not wait? And the thing there I want to be touching on is why it's super important to be balancing speed with operational control, especially in this day and age where CPOs are required to be way more agile and in their product strategy and execution. And finally, the how. And the how is all about the product operating model, and which is a framework to operationalize product ROI. And now if I finish up with some customer success examples. Please feel free to chime in with questions throughout the webinar. There will be a Q&A session. We'll be collecting questions. If the questions are relevant, I'll answer them in context. Otherwise, we'll do it at the end. So without further ado, let's get started. What is product ROI? So product ROI is essentially the quantifiable return generated by a product relative to the cost of developing and marketing it. And the thing about product ROI is it doesn't always necessarily have to be a financial metric. It doesn't always have to be net profit. There are other metrics that can be used, like metrics over available resources, to calculate product ROI. And why is it? The other part of product ROI is it also helps CPOs showcase product outcomes to their peers and in the boardroom. And this is critically important. And the reason I say it's important is because product is one of those areas where the metrics tend to be a little bit more ambiguous. If you're a CFO or a CTO, there's some very clear metrics you can point to. As a CFO, of course, you're measuring profitability of the entire business, and it's a pretty simple metric that you can showcase to the board. If you're a CTO, you can sort of measure, operating velocity or product velocity and the ability to deliver engineering capacity, which is also relatively straightforward to manage. In the case of product, it's not that straightforward. So an example of a good metric is that we typically, and I've used in the past, is metrics over available resources. And that's a good metric because it gives you the ratio of expected contribution of a product towards a measurable business outcome, whatever that outcome may be. So that's a great example of a metric that helps measure product ROI. Now I'll move on and talk a little bit about why it's important and why we should focus on it right now. And the reason for that is there is always an impetus to demonstrate a return to the business, especially for product-led organizations or product-focused organization. It's in the boardroom, and it's extremely important for the CPO to be able to step up and sort of say, hey, you know what? Here's why, and here's how product is delivering value to the business. So I'll start off with a simple stat, and this is based on a survey that we did about a year ago within our community here with product leaders and product managers and product ops leaders. And this is actually a pretty interesting and stark stat. So less than 30% of product investment and resources directly connect to revenue. That's saying something. I mean, because what that's implying is the other 70% is essentially a shot in the dark, or I'm kind of throwing darts. The idea here is how do we extend or expand that to way beyond 30, 50, 70, or even 80% of investment connected directly to revenue. That's kind of what we want to be able to get to. And that's kind of what we'll talk about a little bit as we walk through the webinar today. Two things. Why is it important now? A lot of customers I speak with, they're like, hey, you know, I realized the importance of this, but I don't realize the urgency. And there are kind of two key reasons here. One is speed is extremely essential for CPOs today to adapt to rapidly evolving market changes. And the reason that's important, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, for CPOs, especially in this day and age, there is a constant need to evolve product strategy. You're not always necessarily doing annual planning or even 5-year planning or anything. You may be planning every quarter or within quarters, and you want to be able to flexibly adapt and change your product strategy and the execution. So the part that usually it's always easy to sort of change the product strategy, but the execution there's a bit of a lag to it. And that's the second point here. As we increase speed of change of product strategy, organizational visibility into the strategy changes. And operational decisions become extremely important and need to become a lot more visible across the organization, especially as organizations get larger. Else, you have a disconnect between the top of the organization as you flow further down. So that's why the now is extremely important in order to maximize product ROI. So moving on. So what I'd like to do is transition to, as we're setting the intro, one thing I didn't talk about is there are going to be a couple of polls here. And we'd love your feedback on a couple of things here, because we'd love to understand how you're running your business within your industry and your space. So the first poll that Alyssa is going to throw up here is, what is your top focus to maximize product ROI in 2024? There are 4 options here. 1, getting the data right to make the right product investments and divestments. Divestments, by the way, are extremely important. Investing in technology to operationalize outcomes, setting and optimizing for the right OKRs goals, and enhancing cross-functional collaboration to deliver on your operating plan for the year. So I'll give everyone a couple of minutes to answer the poll. It should be in front of you. If we get the results quickly enough, we'll throw it up immediately. If not, we will get to it at the end.
No, it's looking good.
Melissa?
We've had 27 participants answer already, and it looks like the top choice here, I'm going to share the results, is to get data to make the right product investments / divestments with a second runner-up here to set and optimize the right OKRs and goals.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the quick response. So this is actually, I would say, from my perspective, unsurprising. Getting data is always the hardest thing to do. And talking to product leaders across the industries, the one thing they say is, hey, we have a lot of data, but how do we sort of connect it to make the right product investments and divestments? And how do we then connect that to the right OKRs and goals? So thank you for sharing that. And we'll dive into a little bit more into how we operationalize this using a framework. So let me go to the next slide here. So what I'd like to introduce here, and it's not pertinent to the poll question, but also how it gets to the how of product ROI. It's all well and good to say, hey, this is what product ROI is, and this is why it's important. But the rubber hits the road when you get to the how. And we believe in, what we practice and what we've helped our customers practice as well, and we've seen success with, is a concept of a product operating model. And it's not something that we ourselves have come up with in Dragonboat. It's an industry standard. We're ones to sort of one of many to have adopted it and also operationalize it. And there's a lot of industry experts that believe in this and believe that this is the right way to approach and address the ROI question. So I'm sure many of you know in the product world who Marty Kagan is. And one thing he says is product operating model has 3 dimensions: product strategy, product discovery, and product delivery. And when you put all this together, you get a product operating model. In concept, it's fairly straightforward. Similarly, Melissa Perry, who you might have heard, she's the founder of Products Labs, and she's also just written a recent book on how successful companies build product at scale. And her take on this is also, has a very common thread. The product operating model is all about translating business and product strategies into actionable outcomes. And it's also about setting principles, culture, and values that guide the product team's operations, aligning everyone towards common goals. And that's the one common theme you'll notice. It's about aligning everyone towards common goals. And the product operating model and the way, and as we dive into it, you'll see how that helps, and then how that then helps maximize ROI from a product perspective. The other interesting stat, an important stat that we like to refer to, is something that McKinsey published a few months ago in one of their white papers. And this is quite important, and because they surveyed over 1,000 public companies. And what they say is the following, and I think this is extremely insightful for any product leader out there, and the stat especially. So having a mature product model is strongly correlated with business performance outcomes, and business performance outcomes is essentially proxy for ROI, and product ROI for product-oriented companies. And there's 2 key stats that I think, or maybe measures that these companies like to look at: customer engagement and higher brand awareness, both of which are extremely good indicators of how well a business is doing and how well a product is performing. So 38% higher customer engagement and 37% higher brand awareness. Super powerful stat, and something that we believe is showcased in how a lot of our customers and others out there are working when they implement a product operating model. So let's dive a little bit into the product operating model and how it actually works. So the product operating model is essentially involves multiple stakeholders, and each of the stakeholders has different contexts. We have executives, we have stakeholders across from different functions, whether it be sales or marketing or customer success. We have customers themselves, we have product managers, we have engineering. All of these stakeholders, they need to collaborate, and each of these stakeholders have different cadences and contexts and workflows. And we need a way to bring it all together and connect them. And that's where the product operating model comes into play. So, and the way it works is it has multiple different components. There's strategic allocation and monitoring. There's portfolio planning and delivery. There's feedback and road mapping and work management. All of these are important. Each of these creates a context for the next level. So strategic allocation and monitoring helps with portfolio planning and delivery, which again helps with feedback and road mapping, which then leads to the work management, which is the actual tactical operations of delivering the product and getting it out the door. And this is extremely important because A, they're all not linear, as you can see. And there is a feedback mechanism within each one of these, and as you go through this. So it's extremely important to be agile when working with a product operating model in the modern context. The other thing also here is all of this, when done well, leads to effective go-to-market. And effective go-to-market is essentially three pieces. It's product, value, and outcomes. If we deliver good products, we deliver good value, and which then automatically leads to better outcome, which essentially, as we spoke about earlier, is better ROI. So having this or something similar, a product operating model in place is a really good, big value driver for organization. And what I'd like to touch on next is how do we actually do this and put this in place? And this is sort of where Dragonboat comes into play. What Dragonboat does is it helps put your product operating model into practice. I'm not going to dive into the actual nitty-gritty of how Dragonboat works. We'll have a couple of follow-up sessions that Alyssa touched on as in parts 2 and 3 of this. But there are a couple of things that us and our customers have seen of value when it comes to putting the product operation model into practice. One, the Dragonboat connects product ROI with resource allocation. And this touches back to the metric that I introduced earlier on, which is metrics over available resources, more as we call it. And it's a great way to visualize more. You know exactly what allocation is being, what resources are being allocated to specific strategic initiatives, product initiatives, and what are we seeing in return? What are the outcomes? The other thing is further downstream is the ability to measure business outcomes against what we're delivering on the product roadmap. This also is extremely important because as it allows and enables product managers and product leaders to quickly course correct if the roadmap deliverables are not quite going out to plan. So if we're over investing in a specific area of the product and not realizing the business outcome in the time frame that we see as being relevant, it's an opportunity to course correct. You can do that in real time. So two very tangible examples of how Dragonboat can help with this. Having said that, let's dive a little bit into the actual customer examples. I'll dive into two of them. The first one is a company called ECS. They're a 600 million plus logistics company based out of Belgium. They implemented a product portfolio management framework top down, CIO down to enhance visibility and collaboration between everyone from the individual contributors, product managers, all the way up through to leadership. And this is a very interesting stat. And it always blows my mind to see that one of the things that they identified, and this goes back to what I touched on the previous slide, is they cut out 80% of non-productive investments. And they were able to redirect that in real time or on an ongoing basis towards initiatives that were delivering more value. And this was over a 2-year look back. And this is something that they were able to do on an ongoing basis regularly. And this is a quote from their CIO. Its visibility has improved greatly. They have a huge team of people that have access to exactly what the team's working on, leaders down, and there's a huge amount of trust built from top to bottom because everyone is singing from the same song sheet. So it makes a massive difference to the entire company and to the value delivered across the organization. The second example is some of you may have joined a US bank webinar, a CPO webinar where Rob Seidman, who's CPO of US Bank's Buy Now, Pay Later product line. And this, again, he's got some great insights there. If you haven't had a chance to listen to that, it's recorded. Please feel free to go and listen to that. I would highly encourage it. They launched a BNPL product in 9 months. Having been in payments for a long time, to be able to do that in a company that has 30,000 people is unprecedented. And the ability to align so many different stakeholders and 30 engineering teams to be able to deliver on time. And they had a time to revenue goal, which of course I cannot, they weren't willing to share with for obvious reasons. But the reality was all of this was achieved by implementing a product operating model. The other thing also that Rob touched on is the visibility and accountability of business outcomes from group president all the way down to the individual PM. So common theme again, visibility and accountability across the board, top to bottom, independent of the size of the organization. So it's super powerful and important to be able to implement this product operating model. It brings together the entire organization and really helps drive towards a common goal. So 3 key takeaways before we get into the final poll. And I just want to touch on that super quickly since we only have a couple minutes. 1, what is product ROI? I've touched on this multiple times. It's the quantifiable return generated by a product relative to the cost of developing and marketing it. And it can be a financial metric or it can be a non-financial metric in many organizations. Either way, just the ability, it gives CPOs that authority and empowerment as they look to communicate this across the broader organization. Why is it important? It's important because it enables product leaders to maximize speed of execution while providing visibility into evolving strategy and execution across the organization, and which is extremely important as organizations get larger. And 3, how do you operationalize it? We touched on it on the product operating model, on how you can connect product strategy and delivery to outcomes, and which is essentially ROI. So those are the 3 things. What is product ROI? Why is it important? And how do you operationalize it? We've got 5 minutes left, so I want to do 2 things. 1, run a quick poll again, and then we can jump into questions. So here's the next poll. Based on what you've heard, how likely are you to implement a product operating model to realize ROI in your organization? And here are the 4 options. Some of you may already have one, which is great. Congrats. Next 6 months, 12 plus months, or you guys feel, that's not something that's of interest at this point in time. Give 30 seconds, and then we can dive into questions. In fact, while we wait for the polls, I'll also like to touch on a couple of things. This is a 3-part series. We have part 2 coming up on April 17, where Denise Hemke, she's a CPO at NeoGov, also an expert on product ROI, and she's going to be talking about key ROI measures and how product teams can use these measures to quantify product ROI. So diving into the next level of details into how do you start measuring. And in part 3, in early May, Shelley Perry, also she's the managing director of Scale Logic Ventures, and she's going to talk a little more about how cross-functional teams collaborate to measure and product ROI. Alyssa, do we have results of the poll?
Yeah, we do. We got 21 participants in the poll, and over half of them answered next 6 months. So that is very exciting.
Wow, that is super exciting. Not only that, I think it looks like over 75% already have one or have planned to do something in the near term. Thank you all for your feedback. If you have further ideas, thoughts, comments on how you're doing this and how you're implementing your product operating model, please feel free to share it on chat or reach out to Alyssa. The other thing also I'd like to do is show, we always also have these group demos, which we have on a monthly basis. The next one is on March 28th. Scan that QR code, attend that, and we'll dive into how Dragonboat actually works and help answer the questions, dive into the nitty-gritty in the product. So having said that, I'll move into the Q&A. Couple of questions that came up. One was, well, yes, there was a question on how to actually measure outcomes. Great, so fabulous. Join part 2, and we'll dive into the details. I would also encourage Guame, I think, I hope I pronounced that correctly. If you attend the demo, we'll dive into the product, and we will dive into some examples on how to measure outcomes as well. The other question that came up was, the work I've done has recently directly contributed to increased NPS scores and called out during sales cycles. How can I translate those into a financial output so I can forecast revenue from less flashy work? Yeah, unfortunately, there's no easy answer to that question, translating NPS to revenue. I can tell you that as being chief customer officer right now. What we typically, one way to do it, and have done it in the past, is to have a lot of NPS companies do this. They have a proxy for every promoter. There is a proxy to say, if you have a promoter score of, or NPS score above a certain threshold, let's say 70 plus, we, based on research of our existing customers, this is what the value drivers we saw. It could be like expansion revenue, it could be upsell revenue, or whatever it may be. And then you can use that as a proxy to say, hey, look, an NPS of this led to this proxy. So every time you get converted neutral to a promoter, that's what the value driver is going to be. But having that proxy and calculating it, the onus is on the person driving the NPS survey. So that's what I would say. I know we're out of time. If there are other questions that come up, please do send it. There are a couple other questions. We will answer that offline, and Alyssa will reach back out to you. Thanks again for everyone's time. Appreciate your participation, and yeah, look forward to seeing all, if not some of you, in our next session. Thanks all.
Thank you, everybody. Join us next time for Denise Hemke talking about how to measure product ROI. Thank you, everybody.